where we left off was really kind of got the color map started for the gear. So remember, when you come in, right, in texture paint, you just click on the actual gear, right? We can always turn the quad body off, right? Remember, our outliner has these little eyeballs that allow us to control the visibility for whole objects, right? So outliner, kind of has that cool little functionality to it. In this case, what I wanted to do is I wanted to kind of do a little bit of texturing here. And I wanted to kind of do a little bit with like roughness maps and things like that. So I'm not going to try to get every little part of this textured. I figure it doesn't hurt to remind you guys about some of your dodge and blend and multiply features, as well as stencils again. But really, more of today's focus is going to be on getting you guys to do like a roughness map for the metallic parts, as well as doing a transparency map. So at this point, I've got this object selected. We're going to bring up our paint tools. Remember, 8 is the quick key for that, so our paint tools are up. Of course, you can always go to your brush area here, right? You can see that there's that quad gear color. So remember, you can always kind of click on these to paint which map you want, right? So if you go to wrench, screwdriver, you will see your map types kind of there. So not really a layer system, but at least it lets you kind of pick your active texture. So in this case, we got our quad color on. Remember, you can hide or unhide stuff, right? So remember, if you go to 3, I could go in here and I could select, just say like a polygon on the gear here. And remember, we can go to mesh, show hide, and you'll see there's quick keys for these already. Control H, Alt H, Shift H. Of course, what I first want to do is select linked, right? So that allows me to select those linked. And of course, we go to mesh, show hide, and you see I can hide unselected, Shift H, right? So remember, in the mesh menu, show hide, hide unselected. And that will allow you to kind of hide everything else, right? So that's kind of one of the neat little things you could do there, just to make sure kind of everything's in good shape there. So remember, you can always go mesh, and you can always hide your polygons or unhide your polygons. All right. So now that I've done that, I can hit 8 again to go there. Now you'll notice when I go to 8, everything's back. So remember, your actual paint mask feature up here also works for kind of your hiding stuff. Although, you notice right now it's kind of masked again. So be aware that if I go back to 3, I'm just going to select linked again. So you need to kind of have that selected, even though everything else is hidden. 8. And then you'll see with this on, it hides everything. But also it doesn't gray out this guy. So whenever you use this mask, you do need to make sure whatever you have selected is what you want to paint on, basically. But it also works for hiding stuff that's hidden in, say, 3, right? 3 is face selection mode. So kind of remember that. And then, of course, I could just do some stencil work, right? So I can easily just, make sure we're on the regular paintbrush. I'll probably bring strength up to 101 again. And, of course, we can go to texture here. In this case, I don't have any textures in there. But remember, you can actually technically click new from there. And you'll see it's here, but you don't really have anything loaded per se. So that's kind of one of the reasons why I always kind of go down to here to add, because then I have all the full controls, right? So remember that kind of magenta rectangle gives us that. So we hit open, and we can go find some stencils to paint with. Of course, you guys can always build up your better texture libraries. I feel like this... Yeah, that leather will work. We'll open up image. So that image is now loaded in. When we go to texture up here, you'll see that it's the one that's available there. So remember, you could this kind of lets you add a new one. You could kind of turn it off. But there's this little kind of checkerboard browser right here. Click on that. That'll show you all your textures you've loaded in. Now remember, though, texture by default is set to view plane. In this case, I feel like I'm going to use stencil, right? But if you do use view plane, remember, view plane will work like this. it just kind of keeps dropping down the texture. You see how it kind of just drops it down? Now, if I go to stroke and I turn up spacing, you'll see better what's happening, right? It's kind of dropping the texture down again and again and again and again, right? So that is, of course, what that does. Guys, shh, guys, shh, shh. All right, so I'm going to turn my spacing back down to 10% because that's a little too much spacing in this case, right? But you'll notice it's kind of keeps adding the same exact texture again and again and again and right on top of each other. So, like I said, if you're trying to do something much more of a randomized noise, the view plane with your different spacing controls works better. In this case, I feel like I want to reproduce more exactly the texture I'm seeing instead of just kind of repeatedly dropping it, up, right? That's what that does. I want to switch my mapping and the texture from mapping view plane to stencil. And that's the one that actually gives you your image, right? And you can paint exactly that image. Right mouse button moves it. Control right mouse button rotates it. And shift right mouse button zooms it. And it works best kind of from the corners, right? You get a little more precision control from the corners, the sides, right? So if you try to do it from here, it get a little weird because it just gives it a bit of a better bias from those corners. Now, your zoom won't work, Alt-right mouse button, because the right mouse button is kind of being used for that. But Alt-left will move, Alt-middle will move, or Alt-left will rotate, Alt-middle will move. Scroll wheel will still work for zoom. So you still have a zoom, it's just the scroll wheel. And then we just paint this. And you see how it's kind of doing exactly the texture. So instead of kind of constantly pressing down the same texture on top of it as small little brush strokes, we're painting exactly the image we're seeing here. So I figure this would be just kind of a nice little bit of quick recap of how view plane and how stencil differ, and we'll give you different results. All right. So just kind of getting a little bit more here. Remember, control right mouse button, rotate. And there we go. We just kind of get a little bit of texture paint there. But you see how it's kind of got a bit of a distinctly different look than if it was just view planed on. View plane would kind of take the whole texture and basically place it down as the brush size, and then seriously, like a couple pixels away, do it again. A couple pixels away, do it again. Like I said, that tends to be better for like a low-level kind of freckly noise than it is for reproducing an exact image with differentiations here. Because you'll see in the texture, kind of there's little scratch marks here, and then slightly darker up there. So stencils are better at reproducing exactly the image, and kind of the view plane is better at kind of doing noise-based stuff, freckling. I tend to use the view plane a lot more with texture mask, although sometimes I will use it with texture. Remember, it works for both. Both have view plane, both have stencil. I'll turn view plane back on so that my navigation works normally, right? Alt-right mouse button will zoom. So just some quick reminders of how that works, right? And remember, if you don't want your texture on your brush anymore, just go to Texture menu, click on that X. The texture's still there to be selected, right? But X kind of turns it off as being used for the brush at the moment. So once you get used to some of those features, Blender's core painting features up here are quite good, pretty darn good, pretty darn nice. Like I said, just needs more of a proper layer system, and the B-Painter add-on's great at that. But now we have kind of that. Of course, if we want to, we could just use regular brush with no texture. We could turn our strength down a lot. And we can actually go to what's called mix, right? It's right next to the color for the paintbrush. We click on mix, and here's all of our blend modes, right? So if you want to kind of darken some areas up, we can go to either color burn or multiply. I tend to like multiply more. And then I can go down and I can pick a much darker color. Make my brush size smaller, right? Like so, kind of just right or left bracket key. Now, if you wanted to use your line stroke for this, you can. But sometimes I like to kind of not, just so it gives me a little bit of kind of roughness. But you see how with kind of a low strength, a dark color, and multiply set, you could basically come in and just kind of darken some areas up a little bit. So you notice how this can kind of give you a nice little bit of extra variation in some areas. So remember, you actually have that functionality on all your brushes. You can maybe darken it up around where those pipes are going to go. There we go. Darken them up here. Remember, this is your regular brush, so any stroke can be used. If I wanted to use line, right, for these, it'll work as well. But a space is usually our default, and that makes it behave very much like what you'd expect a paintbrush to behave like. Of course, we could switch to, say, something like color dodge. And that can allow us to kind of lighten up some areas to make it kind of look like it gets a little bit worn there. So remember, you can actually go in here and easily kind of make some areas a little bit brighter, kind of look a little bit more worn. And just a little bit of taking advantage of your different kind of blend modes on your brush can actually give you extra color variation, right? You can kind of see how it's not all exactly the same color anymore, and it just makes it look a little more worn, a little more lived in, right? So remember, you have these blend modes right here, and you've got a good amount of them, right? So those blend modes are something to very much take advantage of when you're doing painting. All right, save that. Remember, make sure to go over here and save your image as well. Alt-S is the quick key. There we go. So once you've done some good painting, just go over here, image, save, Alt-S if you want to use that. We do have file, external data automatically pack in a Blender file. So when we save, it'll pack the texture in there as well. Now in this case, I'm going to turn off that little paint mask so we can kind of see everything else. And now we can see this just looks more dynamic, more interesting, right? Now, on this particular one, I'm not going to worry about going really, really hard on the stencil stuff. So, yeah. Yep. Giovanni, Nick, you've got passes to go somewhere. Not quite yet, but there we go. Geo, pass to go somewhere a little bit later. So anyways, I'm not going to try to paint every little part of these because, you know, the great thing about a lecture for high school students is it's showing you the concepts, the tools. We've already seen it plenty. I'd rather focus on the new stuff I want to show you than trying to get all of these little aspects done. And the two things I really wanted to show you guys, and remember, if you want to do eyeball textures, just find a cool eyeball texture picture and just use your stencil, right? So exactly the same way you painted this, just find a cool eyeball texture you like. You know, you can search online, right? And just use stencil to paint it on there, right? So what I wanted to show off was roughness maps and alpha maps, right? Transparency maps. So quickly we'll do the roughness map because that's going to be pretty quick and easy to set up. So in this case, I'm going to go back to my kind of reddish magenta ball here, right? It's kind of right above. Kind of got these little magenta guys at the bottom. That's for texturing material stuff. Obviously, you have your shading workspace also, which could be cool for using the shader tree itself, shader network nodes to plug stuff in. But I'm going to scroll down in our material area, and you'll see that I have some controls here, right? I have specular. We'll turn that down a lot. And I have metallic, and we could turn that up a lot, and you'll see it starts to get a little bit different. Now, what we're going to do, though, is we're actually going to not make a map for metallic, right? You can, of course, do that, but I find it's a little easier to use roughness. If you're just trying to go for a core, simple, hey, I want some metallic here, I want it not there, and to have the ability to make the metallic adjustable later on. roughness. So we're going to click on the dot for roughness. And of course, what we could do is we could go look for, and sometimes it pulls up the whole menu here, because you can plug a lot of things in roughness. You'll see that there's these little triangles at the top and the bottom. So if I go to the triangle at the top, we'll eventually get to texture, image texture. There we go. And we see that in the roughness area, it brings in our ability to do new, right? So we click on new. We'll call this quad gear rough. And we'll, of course, make it 2048. So I'll do 2048. If you've got a device that can handle more than 2048, go for a higher, like 4096. But I think we'll just kind of keep it simple. And we'll hit OK there. And now we've got a texture plugged in there. Now, this, much like everything else, is the kind of thing where we need to make sure to kind of fill it in, right? So we've got the roughness. We'll want to make sure. Yeah, that's fine. You'll have the video for later. Plus, you know this stuff. So if I click on here, because right now we don't really quite have the texture painted, so you might have to go to the the paint area here, click on this little kind of pull down, right? The one that looks like kind of like a landscape image, a triangle with the small white dot. And you'll see that there is a map rough here. So you kind of do need to make sure that you've got the proper texture picked here, right? Because if you go to the wrench and screwdriver, you might not see it yet here. It's kind of one of those things where it's technically still empty. So we make sure to pick kind of quad gear rough here. We'll grab fill bucket. And we want to do is we want to pick a color. Now, believe it or not, I want to say white actually is 0 for the roughness map. So we got the fill bucket on. And what we're going to do is we're just going to kind of pick the color to be white. We'll just click on the texture here. And there we go. And you see how there's no roughness here at all on this? But now we have a texture, right? It's been filled in. We can go to image here, save as. And we'll just save it right to where it's on the desktop. Save as image, roughness. And then, of course, one of the things we could do is we could actually take advantage of our masking tools, right? So I could easily go into, say, 3 for face mode. And in this case, I want to unhide everything again. So we go to Mesh, Show Hide, Reveal Hidden, right? And in this case, I actually want to select some polygons. And you notice I'm kind of selecting a polygon on this and this, this and this, this and this, because it's actually going to take advantage of the seams for your select linked. All right, select linked. And then, of course, I can hit 8 to go back to paint mode. Right, 8 is texture paint. Click on that polygon. You see these are kind of kept there. Now you'll see roughness shows up in here. And I'm going to actually pick a kind of mid-gray color. And I'm going to click on these to fill. And we are not seeing that too much. What's going on here? Let's see. Roughness, metallic. We should be seeing that better. What's going on there? Huh. I know my 3D card's not bunk on this machine. What is going on there? Huh. Let me go to shading just to make sure everything's good here. Let's see, roughness. That should all be okay. What is going on? Plugged into roughness, metallics there. But it is affecting everything. What is going on here? Huh. Turn that off. Oh. No, Eevee's on. What's going on here? All right, I'm running into a slight issue there. Huh. That is a bit on the weird side. Let's try to turn that on again. Let's go fill bucket. Make sure that's off. Let me make sure nothing else is getting in the way. Doesn't look like it. Let's pick an even darker color, see if we can get it to pop more. Man, it's not showing up. That is weird. I'm not understanding why we're getting such an issue here with Eevee. Shouldn't be scene lights. Okay, that's a bit on the weird side. Generally, you plug this into roughness and everything's cool. I could not tell you what's going on here. Why it's fighting us so much. We should be able to see the actual metallic properties we want, but we are clearly not right now. That is really, really acting weird. That roughness is not doing anything. What's going on here? Huh. Alright, I'm going to save that image really quick. Save there. I'm going to go to shading trees because we need to maybe replug this in. Oh. Alright, guys, this is why. Sometimes you have to be careful. B-Painter never does this to me, but I know that it happens. You will notice that this roughness is plugging its alpha into roughness, right? Color needs to be plugged in there. Why that does that by default? I think probably when I create the image, I think maybe alpha's on or something like that. But you should unplug this, right? And then grab color and plug it into roughness, and there we go. So double check that the actual right node is connected to the right node here. In this case, alpha was going there, and we hadn't done anything with the alpha channel. So I just needed to make sure color was properly plugged in. There we go. And now you can see we're seeing the metallic. And the cool thing is we could turn the metallic down, right? So it doesn't have to be super metallic. If we wanted this to be not quite as shiny, right, we could turn this on and we can make sure our colors might kind of more gray. And you see how it kind of has more of a brushed metal quality to it. So basically the closer the color gets to white, you'll not see any metallic. The closer the color gets to dark, it'll become like chrome. And whatever you do in between as a color will help that. Of course, this works for all your brushes, so I could go back to my regular paintbrush, and I could kind of pick that kind of mid-gray. Probably turn strength fully up. And we could go in here, and you see I could paint some metal here as well. Now, of course, if I wanted to, I could go and I could paint those gray to match it up. But of course, it doesn't have to be, right? So you can actually start to get metallic in some of these areas, right? So metal map, right? You can get it just through roughness, and then you can play with how metallic or not it is, right? So kind of cool to know about that you have that slider and that control to be able to play with some of those properties. All right, so I'm going to save that. I'm going to save that. And let's quickly do our alpha for this as well. So in this case, I want to create an alpha map to kind of control a little bit of transparency cutting, right? So what we want to do is a couple of things for this, right? So in the little kind of red magenta sphere, we'll scroll down, and we'll see there's an area called alpha, right? And so what we could do is we could click on, but you'll also notice that if you scroll down here, you'll see there's an area called settings in your material. And you'll notice that you can sometimes have blend modes here, right? And I believe it's alpha blend that you actually want when you want the transparency map to properly work. Right now, let's maybe leave it off, though, to opaque. So let's go to checkerboard here, or the kind of little gray dot on alpha. Click on that. Move up to the top of this little browser that pops up. It's got a little triangle up there. Go to image texture. we can go to new. Yeah, I think there we go. The reason why it was plugging into alpha automatically was we had kind of, I think, alpha checked. So I'm going to uncheck that and see what happens. We'll call this quad gear. Oh, it's called alpha. But technically it's transparency, so if you want to call it transparency. There we go. 2048. Let's see if with alpha off, if it plugs into the alpha section. If you want to keep alpha on, though, remember, just change that, right? So let's hit OK. There we go. And we've got a map plugged in there. If we go to shading, yeah, see, there we go. Oh, no, it still did alpha. You got to be kidding me. All right, never mind. For whatever reason, when you're creating it from there, it seems to want to plug the alpha in. So remember, just change that, right? Just plug your color into the alpha itself. There we go. Go back to texture paint. There we go. You'll see transparent's already there. Let's see, it's already on. Make sure that's the active one. And I'm trying to remember if it's white or black for this one as well, because sometimes it's just those different effects. But let's play with that blend mode, alpha blend. And you see how kind of everything disappears? So in this case, I'm going to maybe leave it opaque for the moment so I can see everything. And we'll go to fill bucket. Make sure paint's on. Make sure the quad gear transparency selected. I feel like black should do it. White should be opaque. So let's fill that. There we go. And let's go to settings, blend mode, alpha blend. There we go. We can actually see it is going through there. So actually I think it is black. Let's write black here. Fill. No, actually it was fine. What's going on? Let's see. Actually, it might be alpha clip. I always have to remember which one it is. Let's see. Actually, I think it's alpha clip. We'll see in a minute, though. But you do have to be aware of the blend modes for it to properly show up in Eevee. So now that I've got that, let's minimize this. Let's save this. There we go. Save image as. Control S to save with. And what we can do is we can go back to our regular paintbrush, and we're going to pick black. So remember, your actual color for when you're painting, like say a roughness map or a transparency map, it actually does matter what color is, right? And usually kind of white or black is either 100% on or 100% off. It depends on the map type. Sometimes it depends on the software, but you'll always kind of have one, either white or black, be 0 or 100%. And then anything that's in between will be a percentage in between. So let me go in here, maybe with a smaller brush size. There we go, right? So you see that you have to have the alpha clip mode on. Alpha blend will kind of show through too much, but in the settings section of your material, kind of at the bottom, you want to make sure that blend mode is set to alpha clip. And what this could do is this can show your transparency map, right? And of course, we can play with strength as well. And you'll see that we can actually start to kind of chip away and paint tears in the fabric, right? And if I was to go pick white again, you'll see how I can kind of paint back in. Oh, come on, we should be able to. There we go. So I can paint that back in there a bit, right? So remember, your actual color will matter. And you'll see that you can actually go between kind of white and black or any gray you want to. And you can actually make parts of your texture transparent. Now, of course, a stencil could be used with this, right? To get even better effect. And of course, you know, if you got a Wacom tablet, it'll work even better. And I just kind of paint kind of some of that stuff back in there a little bit. And you see that you can actually start to make tears. So you actually, to do a transparency map in Blender, you just create a texture in the alpha. You do want to make sure that blend mode is set to alpha clip, right? I always forget if it's alpha clip or alpha blend, but once you start painting it, you can kind of switch back and forth really quick just to figure it out, right? And just remember when you go to shading that when you're creating textures this way, sometimes the actual alpha is being plugged in. So if you don't see the effect you're expecting to see, just go back into shading workspace and just make sure that the color is plugged in here instead of the alpha. And it's really easy. You just kind of, click and drag to what you want to plug into. And there we go. So we go back to texture painting, and if we want, we could turn back the other guy being on. And you see how we can actually see through to the creature underneath from the cloth. So, guys, that's basically the texturing I want to show you for this. What we'll do is we'll kind of do one more lecture before the end of the term, which will be kind of just the quick lighting and rendering stuff again. But I just want to make sure that you guys got to see that, hey, if you've got some rivets and some metal parts, roughness, right? And play with metallic controls. If you want to do some tears in the fabric or even maybe have some fur, right? Alpha, you plug your map into alpha, right? And then you just make sure to go to settings here and change your blend mode to alpha clip. And just remember, in shading, just remember that the color, not the alpha, is plugged in. We even remember how we sometimes have that with our normal map also, right? So just double check that your shading is not the alpha, but the color being plugged in. And generally, that'll take care of you well if you've got those plugged in well. All right. So just kind of that last little bit there, just to kind of fine-tune stuff. All right, save that, and we'll end the video there.